the bar is high, and it should be high, and it needs to be high, and it needs to be done in collaboration with providers and clinicians. At the same time, we need to also work towards what does a good future look like for health? What does an ideal system look like for an individual accessing healthcare? Is that a a central repository with all of this information where an individual can have their history, their genetics, their environmental data, and we can use that in responsible, privacy-preserving ways for AI and predictive medicine.
I want to try a different introduction. So I'm going to say my name, Dr. Clenton Coleman. You're going to say your name, Dr. Suraj Saggar. And then in unison, we're going to say, welcome to Recommended Daily Dose. You want to try that?
In unison?
Yeah, like together. I've seen people do it. It sounds pretty cool.
All right. It reminds you like middle school, but no problem.
Never mind. Anyway. Well, we have a special guest, Dr. Estelle Giraud. She is a population genetics scientist turned leader in biotech and frontier medicine. She's also the co-founder and CEO of Trellis Health, whose mission is to build smart, comprehensive health records focusing on pregnancy and new families. So today we're going to get into probably some health tech, some health information and privacy, and she's going to tell us what Trellis Health is. So welcome to the show, Doc.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Yeah, so give us a little bit about your background, because this isn't, I think, the first time we've had someone with your training, your academic inclinations on our show. And so I think having a little background about you would be very helpful for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. So at a high level, I'm a scientist, a PhD population genetics scientist. I spent the early part of my career in academia and then transitioned into industry, really at the rise of genetic testing technologies as those were really taking off from a technology standpoint, and spent about 8 years at a company called Illumina. Most people don't know them, but that's the technology that powers companies like 23andMe, Ancestry DNA.
Can I interrupt you?
Oh, I knew this was coming. I knew this was coming. As soon as you said 23andMe, I knew this was coming. Go ahead. 23.
No. I recently had a genetic testing from African Ancestry, which is a company that is geared toward people of my exposure. Yes. It can tell you your maternal background information. So I recently found out that my ancestry comes from Cameroon. It's the Bamaleki tribe, which is, for people of my texture, is a really important thing because a lot of us don't know where we come from. So, I was scared to do that, but that's such a, for people like me, it's such a mind-changing thing as far as knowing where you're from. So I just wanted to interrupt you, but yeah.
No, and it's that, I think you get at the core of why this is so important. It's so personal to who we are as people, to have some knowledge around, that genetic background and that makeup that we have. And it's something that you don't see, you can't interact with until you get it tested, and then you find some information about yourself. And people respond really well to that generally. I mean, privacy, we can talk about privacy and everything around that. There's so many topics that you can talk about with genetics, but I really spent 8 years at the forefront of genetic testing in medicine and in consumer genomics. Really this idea of, can we take this genetic information that we can start to know about a person and provide better healthcare? So not just ancestry information, but more predictive, personalized healthcare based on a person's genetics.
And that's a huge, obviously, arena of medicine where we call personalized healthcare based upon genetic information, based upon the microbiome, which is another big thing in the infectious disease world, right? Of how human genome interacts with our microbiome, and how that complexity turns on, turns off genes, and how it can be manipulated, and et cetera. But I'll just take a step back as you're going forward. You said you worked with Illumina. So what is the technology exactly that now has been brought to the forefront that makes it more applicable or more widely available? What is
Yeah, it's around cost and scale, and that brings with it accessibility. So, people maybe aren't familiar, but we had a research project, the Human Genome Project, about 20 years ago.
And that's where I'll interrupt you, because that's where my interest is. Even though I ultimately went into medicine, I after college I did an MPH, and I was very, on the cusp of thinking maybe doing PhD. So
yeah.
And I'm sure Dr. Coleman would have preferred I stay in the lab and never came out. But so I was at NIH for 2 years, and I was in Building 10. I was on the Human Genome Project for something called MEN1, and I saw a lot of people then subsequently leave that lab as I went to med school, and they went to in the DC, Virginia area, Tiger, which is private industry, the Institute for Genomic Research. So yeah, but so that was my forte in genetics, and that's where I left it back in '97 when I went to medical school. So
right.
But how tell us the evolution from that point. That'd be very interesting.
Yeah, so that was the forefront of kind of moonshot, right? We want to know what the human genome is. Yes. And it was a huge endeavor. Many years, scientists, hundreds of scientists all over the world cost billion dollars to do that. Now, and it was an incredibly manual process. With Illumina technology, they're able to do that largely in parallel at scale. And so you take the cost down from, $1 million plus through $100,000 plus per genome to $10,000 plus per genome. Now we're down and we have line of sight to $100 per genome on this technology. And that cost reduction and that scale has happened so fast, faster than Moore's law. So, we're in tech space now, we're talking about technology, but Moore's law is the notion that computer chips get cheaper, right? So law of technology, Illumina's sequencing technology was decreasing in price faster than Moore's law. It's a huge inflection point. And so when you think about cost reduction, the applications open up. You can start to do things in population genomics that would not have been feasible from a monetary perspective before. And then the more you understand about populations, the more you can understand how that translates into health. So it becomes an applied science really fast.
Well, I appreciate that background. You've actually, as we said, took something very complex and broke it down and explained it very efficiently. So thank you.
Yeah. So I guess, we're kind of still on my background, but I transitioned that because I saw this problem, again and again in healthcare, where there isn't a really good place for this information to live. There isn't a good data infrastructure layer of our healthcare system. This is a problem felt by everybody that interacts, clinicians, everybody in the system feels this. At the same time, I really care deeply about privacy and kind of ownership of this genetic data that's critical. Right. And so to cut a long story short, Trellis Health, we're really building a health data hub and a place for families to collect this information about themselves, whether it's genetics, medical information from their environment, kind of all of it in one health data hub. And then we build software tools on top of that to allow people to manage, specifically women, to manage their pregnancy healthcare journey better, to kind of fill in some of those gaps between. Pregnancy is a really unique aspect in someone's life. You're thinking about genetics, you're getting genetic testing done, you've got broad and deep measurements happening, whether it's heart rate or blood pressure or sleep or weight or whatever it is, you've got multiple aspects of what constitutes health information all happening at the same time. And so we're just creating tools for women to manage that in a more efficient way.
You think pregnancy was, I guess, the impetus to try to coalesce that? Because I think it's a no-brainer for me to try to get all the information in one place, because I think some of our frustration as clinicians is trying to get the proper information and keep it in
Absolutely.
one repository. I think with in a pregnancy situation, you know, most of the care is pretty centralized. I would assume it's centralized. So my question is, what are some of the challenges did you run into in trying to keep all that information, I guess, coalesced in one space?
Yeah, then I'll just go, like, for instance, does this hub interact, with all the EMRs? I mean, at our own institution, we have an EMR in the ER, an EMR in the outpatient setting, an EMR in the hospital, which is home.
Every doctor has their own different EMR.
It's somewhat insanity, for a lack of a better word.
So when I want to send a record to Dr. Saggar, I have to scan it, print it out, fax to him. He has to upload it to his system, and imagine doing that multiple times. It's a waste of paper. It's a waste of time. So.
Yeah. And from a patient perspective, I obviously don't have a clinician perspective, but I was going through this just the other day. I have 20 plus logins. Like, even if you're using the same EMR system, I have a different MyChart login, a different password.
Yes.
The experience isn't great all around. And I will say as well, like, this is not a new idea in healthcare. I think people have been feeling this pain point for a while. It's kind of the holy grail of, can we build a system that's everything is all in one place, and people can access that as they need to, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So a couple of things. I deeply care about the health professional side of this. Having said that, I spent a decade selling a frontier technology and a really kind of a future health vision situation into healthcare, and it was extremely challenging with Illumina, right? The way the healthcare structure is, and if you're selling into a hospital that then has to get everybody on board, their chief information officers on board, their security people, it flows down through the doctors, the primary care practitioners, they then have to get their patients on board, and every single hospital that you go to is different. And so for a startup, for a company building in that space, it's just a really challenging problem to solve, and you end up fitting into the systems that already exist. Right. Our philosophy is you can build a better system in parallel to the existing systems that kind of happen today. And then you need a care journey that allows you to do that and is supplemental to that care journey. And so we don't want to focus on, a cancer patient or somebody where you really do kind of need that that really close kind of hand holding. What we're thinking about with maternity health is that we can be supplemental to their relationship and their information access with their OBGYN. And through, I don't want to get into too many details here, but another aspect is around timing. So there have been huge changes and regulatory inflection points around access to EMR records from a consumer standpoint, with the 21st Century Cures Act, with some of the health information exchanges that exist. This is getting easier and easier to deal with interoperability. And so from a consumer standpoint, it's getting more frictionless as well. And so, our long-term vision is that we build in parallel, and then we're able to integrate back in and really kind of help support clinician workflow as well, provider workflow as well. But we don't want to limit and kind of just fit within the existing problems of the industry by building within that from day one.
When you say build parallel, like if I use like Epic is one of the big players, or McKesson, are you saying you're building in concert with them, and then at some point it can interact with those systems, or is it something different? Because not that those are the only systems that are out there, but those are certainly two of the big ones. Even Epic is probably even bigger than McKesson. But then our own institution has its own homegrown system. So well, first of all, there's so many things to discuss. I mean, you were also just talking about the culture, and I'm still old enough to remember when I did my training that we used paper charts, right? And then when we were switching to EMR, there was a lot of talk about, should we do paper? Should we do EMR? And it just seems funny to even think about that, because obviously now everything is EMR. But you're right.
The reason why that
took some time. It took some time.
Yeah, but the reason why it changed is because Medicare mandated that
Correct.
we had to use EMRs. So do you think that's going to be the future of these healthcare repositories? Is that, you know, the insurance company will mandate that everything is kept in nice, neat little packages, or you think that's up to, because I think if you approach it from the doctors making an effort to organize the information, it's going to be a long battle. So I don't know
exactly
who's going to be responsible, if it's patients or
so you're saying if it's mandated by the federal government, CMS, then there's no choice, right? So
right.
So I think the mandate now from, you know, regulatory guidance is that we need to move towards more of a system where consumers have access rights to their data, and to make that process easy. So 21st Century Cures Act says that a patient, an individual has the right of access free of charge via API to their medical data. That's what's being mandated. So that's the shift that you're going to see. And it's less so for hospitals, it's more so for, you know, the Epics of the world to be able to support that capability for access. I think,
when you say access, does that mean, so now we're getting into some of the legal issues, right?
Yeah.
So wouldn't they be, I mean, doesn't anyone have access, or what is the current situation in terms of access to genetic information? Because I think that's always a tricky thing when we discuss with our patients. They, you know, sometimes they'll say who controls this data, and of course there's a lot of misconceptions of where the data goes and how that will haunt them, so to speak, or influence them if they go to try to buy insurance. Or, and then there's the other issue, which is a different issue, which is sometimes patients tell us they don't want to know, right? If they're genetically something, early dementia, what have you. Some may say, you know what, I want to know so I can live my life accordingly. Some say I don't want to live my whole life thinking that I have an increased hereditary predisposition to a certain disease. So I mean, I don't know, Clint, this is more of an open-ended question. What are your thoughts? I mean, I feel like we know that precision medicine, personalized medicine is the way of how medicine's going, but this idea of data being, or patients' rights to data, is that, how do we, as a physician, how do we approach that conversation with our patients? Because on a very elementary level,
I think
oftentimes have concerns with me about getting genetic testing.
It's like Pandora's box. That's how much information, just because you have the information, can you interpret it? Like, I see this all the time. Sometimes patients get the access to the EMR records before I get to look at it. So when I do a lab, it comes to the portal.
Right.
Yeah.
And then
I've been that patient before, getting on my refresh until it comes through.
Right, but a lot of patients don't have the education or the understanding to know what is important, what's not important, or just a perspective. So by the time I get to them, they've talked to their aunt and Googled everything.
After Google.
Yeah. I mean, we could talk for, I'm sure, a really long time.
Is all access to information a good thing, I guess, is in the information age?
I mean, my default is it's a gray area. It's complex, right? Like it shouldn't be, we're not sharing any data and it all has to flow through a incredibly regimented system, and a patient can't have autonomy and agency and kind of ownership over their information. That's not the world that we want to live in the future. On the flip side of that, we don't want medicine to be practiced and the experience of patients to be thrown information that they're not prepared for, or to have that even worse impact a decision that they make in managing their own healthcare in their day-to-day life that's not the right or the best decision for their health. So I think in either one of those extremes, neither one of those is good. The balance probably exists somewhere in the middle, and it depends, you know, on what the specific use case is for that data. There's certain types of data that you do want to have a lot of support and professional guidance through as a patient understands that, particularly for genetics. I mean, this is relevant in medicine, but even more so in genetics, because the information that people can find out can be life-changing. But I think what we do need to do is respect the individual's choice in a lot of those decisions. And some people will want to know, and they should be able to find out. There's a lot to kind of unpack. And this is what makes healthcare as an industry hard to innovate in, because you've got multiple pillars of how to make a model work. You've got economic models that are more complex than any other industry, where you've got the payers separated from the people that are providing the solution, which is separated from the people and the receiving end and using the solution. So finding economic models that work for a business is one challenge. You've also got, you know, this duty of care. We're talking about something as important as a person's health and the way they live their life. This is potentially life and death situations. So this is, you know, enormous, the amount of responsibility on companies digital health companies trying to innovate in this space is, the bar is high, and it should be high, and it needs to be high, and it needs to be done in collaboration with providers and clinicians. At the same time, we need to also work towards, what does a good future look like for health? What does an ideal system look like for an individual accessing healthcare? Is that a central repository with all of this information, where an individual can have their history, their genetics, their environmental data, and we can use that in responsible, privacy-preserving ways for AI and predictive medicine? We will not I was
waiting to get to that.
Yeah, we will not get to predictive medicine without this. And so, you know, for medicine to really like take this enormous leap into the future, we need to be able to find a way to get there. And that's hard, right? This is not an easy thing to do in this industry.
So I think AI benefits by having a bunch of data in one place and able to make, you know, use algorithms to make decisions, whether it's health or finance or whatever. How would you foresee, well, you're probably doing it now with your program. How do you foresee, like, practically that happening? I guess, can you give us an example of how it would work with one of your pregnant patients?
Yeah, so I'll say straight up that this is aspirational. We do not have live products in market today,
but ideally
AI driven. But right, how are we thinking about this vision of the future? So an example during pregnancy is preeclampsia. We don't really have a good handle on what causes preeclampsia. There are genetic risk factors for that. There's environmental risk factors for that. It's a complex condition. There are, things that a patient would need to work with their doctor to kind of manage that through pregnancy and diagnose that. And so with our system and this idea that, you know, having all the data together in one place, you can help identify that. But combining a medical record, combining the genetic data of that pregnant woman with outcomes data of preeclampsia, you know, postpartum preeclampsia, prenatal hypertension, where does it fit on that scale, as well as deep environmental measurements for her blood pressure through pregnancy, medication that she might have been on, compliance, kind of having all of this together, you can start to build a more complex picture of what might be the triggers, what might be the factors, what might be the mechanisms behind preeclampsia, and then take that full circle to the beginning of a pregnancy to be able to say, okay, you might have an incredibly low risk. It's not ruled out. You need to keep, working with your doctor on this, but stratify out, maybe this other group of women are at extremely high risk of preeclampsia. Let's pay attention to that through pregnancy. And, in the US today, we have one of the worst maternal mortality rates in the world. It's conditions like preeclampsia that we need to be able to diagnose better, listen to our patients, have that data-driven kind of approach to identifying the right patients and making sure they get the right care.
And also as a predictive model too. So
exactly.
Dr. Saggar doesn't know what preeclampsia is, but it's usually elevated blood pressure, protein in the urine, and it can eventually lead to eclampsia, which is maternal seizures and all kinds of other complications. But you know, a risk factor for preeclampsia is having preeclampsia in previous pregnancies, and you know, there used to be some consideration for the father being the culprit, but you know, like you said, we really don't know the cause. But I think you know, I think we've seen some success with systems-based programs like CHF. I think like end-stage renal disease. You know, once we work in a system type of you know, population-based medicine, I think that helps. So maybe that's the future. I think that pregnancy is an interesting you know, way to start, because it's you know, there's not that many other moving parts outside of the patient and the family and the obstetrician. So
where are you now in terms of your I mean, in terms of the company, in terms of development now? I mean, in fact, like, where are you located, and what are your kind of goals, or where you know, where you are heading in terms of milestones, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a distributed team between Seattle and the Bay Area. We have a private beta that we're running right now. We're still accepting for that private beta. So if people want to sign up, you know, I'm sure it can be in the show notes, but we have a sign up on our website for that private beta. That's to test, you know, our security, our privacy, you know, everything around our system before going live more broadly at the end of this year, later half of this year.
You know, for me, just very interesting, because you obviously sound like someone who started very much in academics. How did you make that jump to, I don't say entrepreneurship, but, you know, looking in term, starting your own company and making that leap from pure academics and then private industry, right? Is that part and parcel of your personality, or is that something that just based upon what you saw and the need in healthcare?
It's a bit of both. I think I loved academia. I've loved all of the transitions that I've had throughout my career. I would always tell, you know, whoever it is, like, transitions help make you unique, and those are good things, even though they're uncomfortable. They allow you to bring different perspectives.
I like that, being uncomfortable, because I think as physicians, a lot of times we do get comfortable, you know. Clenton has an easy chair, you know, in his office. He gets a little too comfortable sometimes. I'm joking. But, you know, we actually, and this is not about us, so we can talk about some other time, but we made many transitions through our career and continue to do so. But I always hear the time and time again from entrepreneurs and visionaries, and is that, you know, make yourself uncomfortable. So I appreciate you saying that.
No, I think, and being okay with being uncomfortable is a core part of my personality. It's something that I've been exposed to again and again and again. And it's this idea that it's in those moments of uncomfortableness, when you're outside of your comfort zone and you're pushing something and you've got a good reason to do that, that's where you grow and you learn and you experience new things and you have new perspectives on whatever it is. And so leaving academia, I went through one of those big transitions, and it's always been driven by looking ahead and seeing this is something that is literally going to change the world. I want to be a part of that. And so first that was the wave of genetic technologies. Now it's this idea of, you know, health information. We're living in an incredibly digital society. You've got AI, ML. I grew up as a digital native, and then I became pregnant. I had a pregnancy and a little baby boy during the pandemic, and it was like stepping back in time with the systems that I had to use and kind of how that fit together. And it was incredibly jarring as an experience. And I see the movement of our world as we know it, our, you know, becoming digital and everything, all the promises that entail. Like, why can't we take something as important as human health and impact that for the better?
And I think to your testament, the pregnant patient is probably one of the best patient advocates for themselves, I find, in my experience. Obviously, one, because of the age, education, demographics, but I think I think that's probably the most successful transition from a you know, such a stagnated healthcare system to something that will benefit not only patients who have access to to quality care, but also patients who don't have access. So I can see how something like this would benefit patients who, you know, don't have the education or the resources.
Yes.
So I think this is pretty interesting, and I'm happy to see where it goes.
Yeah, because we certainly talk a lot about that on our show about inequalities in healthcare and how, you know, especially COVID-19 has shed, you know, light on these. It's become cliche almost at this point, but if something like technology can kind of leaven the playing field, we're all for it. So tell us a little bit about, you mentioned the website. You know, what are do you have any social media handles, you know, LinkedIn, Instagram, or anything for your company itself? If anyone that's interested out there, our listeners could
you still have MySpace, right?
Right.
I think I'm the only one on MySpace.
MySpace. What was the other one? Friendster. Remember Friendster?
It was Friendster.
Yeah.
America Online with the dial-up, you know. So
AOL, yes.
We have lived through. I still told my son that I got an email address in my sophomore year, junior year in college. He couldn't believe it. You know, he's had an email since he's in third grade. So it is.
I just made an email for my little baby boy.
We're dating ourselves, you know. So yeah.
Yeah.
But where can our listeners find out more?
Yeah. So join trellishealth.com, and there's a link to the beta sign up there. There's, you know, social media links there as well. And then I'm also pretty active on Twitter. People can follow me at Estelle Giraud.
Do patients sign up, or physicians, or who's the target
for beta testing
audience? Yeah.
Patients, pregnant women.
Okay.
Yeah. So women currently pregnant.
Awesome. No, I hope someone will take it. But that and you said you're very active on Twitter. I'm very active on following people on Twitter, but I've had like 3 tweets in my time. So I should be more social media savvy, but I sadly spend a lot of my time just putting pictures of my dog on Instagram in my spare time.
There's always a need for that.
There is. My golden doodle is a good stress relief, you know, along with my family. So.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised how many. I mean, you know, some of your dogs have millions of followers. It's incredible, you know. So
yeah, I'm one of those people that I don't post about my dog, but I definitely consume a lot of dog pictures on Instagram.
My wife and I will send pictures back and forth or videos of dogs all the time, and she's someone who went from not even sure if she wanted the dog to, you know, the dog being the most important part of the family. My son a close second, and myself.
I really think you made a mistake on the name of the dog, though. He gave the dog an old black man's name.
His name was born. He came from Tennessee.
What's his name?
The breeder told me his name was Otis.
Otis,
and he is.
He's an elderly black man.
He's an elderly black gentleman
from Tennessee.
Yes. Yeah, but he came from Tennessee. This is it fits him very well. So,
yeah.
So what's next for you?
Heads down. Just, you know, the pace. So I was in a fast growing company. The pace was insane. You make a leap into entrepreneurship or foundership, and it's, I mean, I'm sure you guys, you know, feel this as well, but there is never enough time in every day to do what you want to do.
Sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, so to speak. We have to pace yourself.
So marathon where you run really, really, really fast the whole time.
Well, we want to thank you so very much. You know, I mean, obviously this is a very high level conversation. I mean, I think we could deep dive into many topics at great length. So I hope that you can come back again and talk to us some more and tell us, you know, the progress you've made. But we very much learned something today. A lot of times, you know, we interview guests and it's entertaining and we hope that our listeners learn something. But I think I can speak for Clinton and I that we both learned quite a bit. So thank you.
Very excited,
for sharing your experiences. Yeah, very much.
That's awesome. And thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. I know this is it's a hairy, big topic. And yes. I think conversations with all aspects of everybody that's involved in this is what's going to make it ultimately
absolutely
good.
So the consumers, the providers, as you mentioned, economic models, payers, and everyone in between. But for us, it was fascinating. So thank you very much. And
thank you so much.
Yeah. So I will wrap us out of here
wrap us out of here
on behalf of my co-host and esteemed colleague, Dr. Clinton Coleman. I'm Dr. Suraj Saggar. This is Recommended Daily Dose. Thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to rate, subscribe, and listen. Find us on YouTube. Find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And we will see you next time. Be well.